Hello everyone, my name is Cyrus and I am working as a software engineer in GeekyAnts. So I have been experimenting with Next for a long time and I'll be discussing what are the new features that have come in Next 13.4. So I would like to ask that how many of you have tried Next and built apps with it? Cool. So, with the Pages router, as you must have read that in Pages router, we used to create pages inside the directory and we could create multiple pages using the Pages directory. So I'll be at initially I was very overwhelmed by the Pages directory, but later I realized that there are some flaws in it. So I'll be discussing also in this meetup. So, how many of you know server-side rendering? Because this talk will be mostly around server-side rendering. Okay, so for those who don't know, I'll explain to you. So, if you create a normal React app, then what you like if you put localhost 3000, then what do you get is a JavaScript bundle from the server, and you get an initial as a empty HTML file. So the JavaScript bundle that you get gets loaded. It executes its task. It loads the DOM in your browser, and you can see the whole React app. But this is very time consuming and it is not very performant because the whole execution of tasks that you wrote for your components is getting executed on the browser. So what Next.js has done is that it has introduced server-side rendering. What you can do with server-side rendering is that you wrote a component, like I create a component app and I put h1 hello world. So what it will do is that in the server only, it will create an HTML of that hello world and it will send back to me to my browser. So it won't be sending me the entire JavaScript. It would be sending me an HTML on my web page, and that would increase my SEO, and I could see the HTML on my browser. Also, it sends some little JavaScript because if I add, suppose, if I create a button and I put on-click listener onto it, so it will the on-click listener won't be can't be executed on server, right? Because it is a browser event. So what I get from the server is the normal button element, but on the JavaScript that I get from the server side rendering, it executes. It's a little bit JavaScript. It executes and put my on click event onto that button, and then I can interact with that whole page, right? So this is what is called server side rendering. So it is all perfect, but there are still some flaws in server side rendering that we'll see in the next slides. But the one flaw that I can see is that if you have a suppose a component that you want to show a list of post in your app, so you don't have any interactivity on that post, right? You just show a to do app where you can see all your to dos. So there is no need of sending the JavaScript bundle on that on the browser to get that executed, right? So what the drawback is there that for all the components we are sending the JavaScript bundle also, and we are also sending the HTML from the server itself, but we are also sending the JavaScript for all the components. So if there was a way that we could differentiate server components, like I could differentiate that these components should be only be rendered on the server and no JavaScript should be passed from the server to execute them. And if I could have some components that I know that they will be executed in browser because they have some event listeners added to it. We need to access the local storage that are only the browser events, right? So if we could differentiate between them, then it would have been very easy. So what Next.js in 13.4, they have introduced React Server components. So let's go to the next slide. So the topics that we'll be covering in this meetup is the first is the app router. This is the main part, and the server actions and the turbo pack. These are all the like they are an alpha version. So we'll be mostly talking about the app router, in which we'll be talking about the React server components, which I told you. We'll be talking about data fetching, and we'll be talking about routes and layouts, right? So let's start with React server components. So as I told you that we need to differentiate between between two components. There should be server side components and client side components. server-side components shouldn't have any JavaScript to be executed on the browser, because for them I only need to get the HTML that I can preview. For client-side components, I need the JavaScript because I need to click on a button, hover on it. So these are the all the events that client-side components use. So this was the main idea behind introducing React Server components, but this is not it. There are many also other reasons why React Server components were introduced in Next 13.4. So why React Server components? So as you may have heard of waterfall problem. How many of you have heard of it? Waterfall problem. Okay, no one. One. So I'll show you the code. Can you see this code? Okay, let me. Now, okay, so let me explain you verbally then. So let's suppose I have a component. I have a three. I have a parent component. I have a child component, and inside that also I have a child component. There is a three-level parent and child relationship, right? So if I want to execute my child component when my parent so there will be three components, like first, second, third. So if I want my second component to be rendered only when first component has rendered, and I want my the second component, the leaf component, to be rendered only when second component has rendered, right? So what I'll do is that in my parent component, I'll execute my async action. I'll in use effect, I'll call my API. Then I will see that if loading is true, then I'll show loading, and if loading is not false, then I'll show the child component. So similarly, child will also do this. Like if it will get its own data, and it will show if loading is true, then it will show its loading is true, and if loading is not false, then it will show its child component. So you can see that the third component is the child component is dependent on the second component, and second component is dependent on the parent component, because only when the parent component will be rendered, the other components will be rendered. So this is called a waterfall model, right? So what can we do to improve this? So what if I could tell my components, all my parent child components, that you request for data only in your component, you don't depend on the other components, right? You just call your API in your own function itself. So this is like the waterfall model, and it what this can be solved by React Server components, because in React Server components we can call our API. We don't need any use effect or anything sort of that functions use that hooks. We can just call our API inside each on our server component. So like if I have my parent component, it can get its own data in its own component. The child will get its own data. They will not be dependent on the other components, right? So this is the one problem that React Server component has solved. This is the second problem that it has solved. So a render only required components on client, right? So as you can see here, so we have navbar here, we have search here, we have sidebar here, we have main element here, button. So also you can see that they are denoted by different colors. The server component has different color, client component has different color. So we don't want all our components to be executed by the JavaScript bundle, right? I just suppose if I have my navbar, I will show my only image there and some text there. So it don't need any JavaScript to be executed because it can be rendered on the server. But for search button, I need to input my the text there, and I need the browser interactivity. So we have divided these components into server and client. So the client components will be rendered on the server also, but they will be getting a JavaScript bundle that will be executed on the browser, and we would be able to see the interaction. But for server side components, they won't be executed on the client. They would be only be executed on the server itself. So what this has done is that it has reduced the JavaScript bundle to very low. Like the JavaScript bundle is very less because the server components have a JavaScript bundle of size 0, because they don't need any JavaScript, right? Only client components need the JavaScript to be executed. So it has reduced the JavaScript bundle to very low. So yeah, this is the game changer for server-side rendering. Previously, a simple Hello World app would require sending over 70 KB of data just to have a div. So now if we don't need interactivity, why I just want to send a JavaScript bundle to my browser? So only thing we get is a HTML and a CSS and no JS. So this is like a game changer. The JavaScript bundle will be very low. It will improve your performance of the app, and there are many. So yeah, advantages is massive savings in bundle size. Initial page load will be faster. You don't need to optimize your other things like used to do in React app. It will be very fast. SEO will be improved. SEO was improved in 12th point version also, because I also used to get the Java, the HTML from in next 12 also. But in 13, it has been improved much more, and components are server by default. Like if you create a component in next 13.4, they will all be server by default. So if you want to make it client, you want to make if you want to create a button on in your if you want to add a button in your app, then you can use client directive. You can place it at the top of your file, then the JavaScript will be sent to the browser, and you can use client components here. But for server side, they are the components are by default server. Right. So this is all about the React Server components, and this has been in the app router that has been released in 13.4 version, because in previous version 12 version there were some problems that we'll discuss. But like there were a pages directory there where we used to send all our we used to keep all our files to load our pages. But in the next 13.4 we have an app directory, and we have layouts. You can explore them in the Next.js docs. They are quite good, so you can explore them. And routing, yeah. So Next.js has introduced a new routing. It is a completely different architecture because it enables React Server components. It allows you to use React Server components. And if you have heard of React Streaming or React Suspense that has come in the latest React 18 version, it also enables us to use that. So these is the you can see that dashboard layout is there. So and like every page that you can create in Next.js will have a dashboard layout, and this is a root layout. So root layout is the layout for all your pages, and dashboard layout will be the pages or will be the layout for your individual page. So if I create a dashboard, it will have a dashboard layout. If I create an admin page, then it can have an admin layout. So we can separate every page with its own layout, and there will be a one root layout which will be sitting on the top of all my app. And we can do any sort of stuff here. We can put HTML body here and HTML tags even here. Okay, so next. So the features of this routing is like route groups. You can separate your routes from each other. You can have different layouts in them. You can have dynamic routes. Like in 12th version, we used to have slug file, dot slug file. It is almost similar to it. Now we have parallel routes in routing. Like if I have a layout, if I have a page where I want to show two different pages. So I have a analytics page and a dashboard page. I can combine those two pages into my one single page, and that would have their own loading states, error states, and all stuff. And intercepting routes is like what if you have created, suppose if you have Instagram, right? So you can see you have a list of feeds on your first page, right? And you can, if you click on an in a post, then you go back to another page of it, right? So intercepting routes is that if I just like if I press photo of someone, a new modal will appear, and the page of that person can appear. So this is about intercepting routes. Like I can load a different page altogether into the existing page that I have, right? So middlewares are there. Like you can like run your code before the request is over. You can redirect it. You can change your headers of your requests, right? So these are the features. And simplified data fetching, this is an also a game changer in 13.13. So no more get static props or get server side props. So in 12, what we used to do is like we used to write different functions, get static props and get server side props, to get all the data. Then we used to pass that to our component, and it was a lot of heavy stuff that we used to do. But now it's not like this. Like we can write our own async functions inside our component itself. So this is how I feel calling Prisma directly in server component. So I'll show you an example how we used to write, how we are writing it now in 13. So yeah, I tweeted last year that one of the problems with Next.js that I faced is that for showing my data in like, suppose I have different pages, like home page, dashboard page, other pages. I used to have a header in every page, right? So what Next.js in 12, what we used to do is, what we used to call our getStaticProps and getServerSideProps that I showed you, a function that I showed you in the last slide. We used to call that all our functions. We used to get our data, and we used to pass that to our every to we used to pass that to the header component every time, because these were the header were the persistent component. It sits on top of every page, right? So we for showing our data in the header component, we used to write our async functions in every page, and then we used to pass that to the header. But so that was very like hurting us, because it was a lot of code, and bundle size were also increases. So now last year there were the RFC was going on for the layouts. So now in 13 they have released the new layouts RFC. So that solves the problem of not passing my data every time to a header component. Why? Because they have introduced React Server components. I don't need my every page to send my data to the header component. I can just call my async function inside only the header component, and that would execute every time. No need of sending all the data from every page to my layout components. Right. So this was the problem that is solved now. And yeah, so this is the React Server component. I tried some experiment few days back where I used a Prisma ORM to get data. Like I created a users table in Prisma, and then I like get that data inside the component itself. So you can see that I just called Prisma, new Prisma client. I initiated the client. I wrote users is await Prisma users dot find many. This is an SQL query. It is running an SQL query inside your React component. So like this is a game changer, because we used to write APIs for, we used to call user fed, we used to write APIs for it. Then we would get our data. Then we used to store loading state, other stuff. So this all the heavy stuff is like compiled into this one, because we just need 2 lines to get our data, right? So this is very cool. And we can use async and await in your server components. So combine SSG, SSR, and ISR. So there were 3 different methods of building your app in Next.js in 12th version. The first one was server side, static side generation, like where I used to build all my pages on my build time. There was server side rendering, which I told you before, that every time I call my browser, the day I would get a HTML from it, and all the data would be executed and sent back to me. And ISR was like incremental static regeneration, where I could put a valid date of 10 seconds. Like if I reload my site every 10 seconds, it doesn't send me the data again and again. It sends me data after only 10 seconds, right? So this was these 3 functions were there in Next 12. But now, due to these server side components, the Next.js team has using fetch, the JavaScript fetch, and we can pass, like if I put normal fetch here, you can see that it is cached until we manually invalidated. Like if I reload my page every time, it is similar to SSG, static site generation, because data won't be coming back every time, right? And the other is no store. If I put cache as no store, it means that it will be refreshed on every time, because it is similar to SSR. Like if anytime if I reload, I will get all my data again and again. And the other is similar to ISR, cached with a lifetime of 10 seconds. Every time I reload my app, the data won't come every time, won't be executed on server every time. It would be executed after every 10 seconds. So this was the advantages. Like we used to write whole functions inside our React components in Next 12, but now this has eased a lot. Yeah. So also talking about in next 12 we couldn't combine these two. Like if you see that I want my some pages to be some async function to be refreshed on every request or cached with a lifetime of 10 seconds. I couldn't have that option in next 12. So now in 13 I can have three all three running on the same time. So this is very like cool because earlier we couldn't have this feature. Right. So server actions, yeah. So server actions has also been in alpha right now. So this enables us to write our async functions on the server itself, calling those functions without in our cider components without needing the use of actual API. So when I want to create a user on my DB, what I'll do is what I used to do was like I could you need to create an API, send that form data to my API, then it would parse that data and send to the backend, and then backend would do all those stuff of inserting in DB. But this is not the case in here. So it has reduced client-side JavaScript. So enhanced user experience with features like optimistic updates and progressive enhancement. These are experimental for now. Like optimistic updates is like I can make my changes on the client and I can tell my client that this has been done, but I send my request to server, so server will tell after some time that it was true or it was a success or failure. Until then I tell my client that this was a success. So after the request comes I can optimistically uh, check that if it was the response was success or not. So other is great developer experience by making it seamless to offload data updates. I can just in my client components, I can make run my SQL queries in my client component, which would have required an API in the past. So you can see an example here if you can see. So I have created a create user function inside my component that, and I have added a directive use server here. So what I do is I initialize the Prisma client and I create a user here like name. I get the form data from the JSX I have written here, and I can directly put my data on the backend itself with on the DB itself without needing the API layers. So automatic code splitting is there. So in server side components, as you know, we can write async await inside our component itself. So I can on the basis of a boolean variable, I can show which dashboard I want to which user which app I want to show. Like if you have seen Swiggy Instamart or Swiggy food delivery, they are total different apps, right? So if you can see here, if I am logged in, I show a different app, and the landing page if I am not logged in. So this has decreased the bundle of JavaScript very high. So no need of like getting all those JavaScript into my browsers. And so turbo pack, this is in beta because this is in beta. So the features are like it is faster than webpack, so it is also faster than white and fast and flexible development experience. It also decreases your bundle size and it has a very developer friendly experience. So yeah, I was trying some to experiment few days ago with using Prisma and Drizzle. Drizzle has is a new thing. It is an also an ORM which with type safety. So I was trying that. I'll play a video here. So you can see that there is a schema here, and I have for Prisma, and what I have done is I have this is the result. I've created a railway app where I can adding users on the DB, and as you can see, I go to my localhost drizzle users. I reload, then I can automatically get all my uh, all those data that I have inserted. So let me show you the code where it was. One second. One second. Yes, yes, one second. Uh, okay, I'll show the code that I had written for the fetching the data. Yeah, so this was the code I had written inside my client component, and I was just getting all my users from the DB itself. No, I was not using any backend API here. So this was only the code I could insert my data into the backend, and I could just use it to show my all the users. So yeah, thank you.